In the quiet town of Chitradurga, Karnataka, India, the year 1996, brought with it an evening that would change everything. Around 7 p.m., a 17-year-old girl was walking home with her father under the cloak of darkness. The streets were eerily silent, the kind of silence that makes you feel like something is watching. As they made their way through the empty town, her father stopped at a small shop to pick up some items, urging her to walk ahead. She hesitated but obeyed, her footsteps echoing softly in the stillness. Moments later, she noticed a man approaching. He wore a cap and walked briskly, his presence unsettling. Her heart pounded louder with each step he took. The man passed by silently, but a chilling realization struck her. He had turned and was now following her. Her breath quickened and fear clawed at her chest. She picked up her pace, but so did he. Panic surged through her as she broke into a run. Behind her, the man's footsteps quickened, and within seconds, he caught her. "Do you think you're clever? Did you think you could escape me?" His hands closed around her throat, cutting off her scream before it could escape. Desperate, she struggled, her vision blurring. But in a moment of defiance, she managed to knock his cap off, revealing his face, one she recognized all too well. Then, like an avenging force, her father appeared, armed with a stone. He hurled it at the attacker, striking him. The girl seized the opportunity, summoning a surge of courage, and grabbed a stone herself. She flung it at his face with all her strength. Stunned and now fearful, the man fled into the shadows. But this wasn't just an attack, it was a confrontation with a monster. The man in the cap was no ordinary criminal. His name was Umesh Reddy, a name that would soon be etched into the annals of India's darkest crimes. This was far from his first act of violence. Umesh Reddy was a predator, a serial offender with a sinister history that few could comprehend. The most shocking part? He was a police officer, a rogue cop who used his badge as a shield for his horrific deeds. Born in 1969 in the Chitradurga district, Umesh Reddy's early years were already marked by mischief and crime. As a young boy, he was notorious for stealing crops, livestock, and even school supplies from his peers. When the villagers caught wind of his actions, Umesh fled, abandoning his hometown to evade consequences. His journey took him to Jammu and Kashmir, where he joined the Central Reserve Police Force. However, the uniform couldn't suppress his depraved nature. Assigned to guard the residence of a senior officer, Umesh attempted to assault the officer's daughter. Caught in the act, he managed to escape before facing justice and disappeared, only to resurface in Karnataka. By September 1996, Umesh had somehow joined the District Armed Reserve, a move that baffled many. How did a man with such a record infiltrate the system? Perhaps it was a lack of proper identification processes at the time, a flaw he exploited to continue his reign of terror. Not long after joining the District Armed Reserve, Umesh began preying on women again. His attacks were calculated and brutal. In one case, he targeted a young woman named Divya. While walking a deserted path one afternoon, she became his victim. Umesh attacked her with chilling precision, stripping her of her clothes, stealing her jewelry, and leaving her humiliated and scarred. Too terrified to report the crime, Divya's silence became a reflection of the fear he instilled in his victims. But Umesh Reddy didn't stop. He continued to strike, each attack more brazen than the last. He was a man who thrived on fear and chaos, evading capture at every turn. As investigators delved into the series of crimes, they uncovered a chilling realization. These weren't random acts by different perpetrators. The pattern of stolen clothes and valuables linked all the incidents to one man, Umesh Reddy. A serial predator was terrorizing the state, and his reign of terror was far from over. On January 22, 1997, during Republic Day parade rehearsals in Chitradurga, fate intervened. Among the gathered crowd, Geeta, the survivor of Umesh's earlier attack, spotted him in uniform. Her heart stopped as she recognized the man who had haunted her nightmares. The attacker she once feared was standing before her, now masquerading as a protector of the law. Her silence up to that point was driven by fear. Who would believe her, a vulnerable girl, against a man in uniform? But the police investigation into the city's mounting crimes gave her the courage to speak out. Geeta shared her ordeal with the authorities, exposing Umesh Reddy's monstrous double life. This revelation led to his dismissal from the police force and his initial arrest. But the battle was far from over. The case against him was weak, hinging solely on Geeta's testimony. The police lacked the concrete evidence needed to connect him to Pallavi's murder. Then, in 1997, during a routine jail transfer, Umesh pulled off a daring escape. Days later, he resumed his killing spree, targeting and murdering 3 more young girls in the same brutal manner. What followed was a horrifying game of cat and mouse. Between 1997 and 2000, the police captured Umesh Reddy 5 or 6 times, yet each time, he managed to slip through their fingers. One escape attempt stood out for its sheer depravity. Chained in custody, Umesh defecated on a police officer's feet, hoping the revulsion would distract them long enough for him to flee. While this particular stunt failed, his uncanny ability to evade capture ensured that he returned to the streets, only to continue his horrifying cycle of violence. Every escape marked the beginning of more crimes, as Umesh Reddy hunted his victims with a level of cruelty that left the region in terror. His escapes weren't just a failure of the system, they were a death sentence for the women he preyed upon. Whenever the police raided Umesh Reddy's hideouts, they uncovered bundles that sent shivers down their spines. These bundles were filled with women's undergarments, gruesome trophies from his victims. Some belonged to the women he assaulted, while others were stolen. Many women accused him of not just attacking them, but also of stealing their undergarments, which he perversely wore to sleep or used to fulfill his depraved fantasies. This bizarre behavior revealed a disturbing mental disorder that added another layer of horror to his crimes. But his cruelty didn't stop there. Umesh Reddy took sadistic pleasure in torturing his victims. He wouldn't simply remove their jewelry, he yanked it off with such brutality that it tore their skin, leaving them bleeding and crying in pain. He seemed to relish their agony, as if their screams fueled his twisted satisfaction. One of his victims, Divya, was spared death, but endured unimaginable torment. He bit her lips savagely, leaving her physically and emotionally scarred. Umesh Reddy's acts painted him as a uniquely monstrous serial killer. For 5 long years, this cycle of capture and escape played out like a gruesome nightmare. Time and again, he eluded the authorities and returned to his spree of terror. Frustrated and desperate, law enforcement plastered his wanted posters everywhere. Yet Umesh had mastered the art of evasion, leaving areas immediately after committing his crimes, and only returning when the uproar had died down. The breakthrough finally came in May 2002. At Kolkata railway station, Umesh Reddy disembarked and casually walked to a barbershop to get his hair and beard trimmed. What he didn't anticipate was being recognized by an auto rickshaw driver. By then, his face was etched in the minds of many thanks to the widespread posters. The driver swiftly alerted the police, who descended on the scene and captured him. This time, there would be no escape. In custody, Umesh tried everything to prove his innocence. When his lies failed, he made a chilling confession, admitting to over 20 crimes, though he stated there were countless others he couldn't remember. Each confession unraveled a trail of terror that left innumerable women assaulted, robbed, or murdered. Umesh believed that stripping his victims of their clothes rendered them powerless, buying him time to escape. The fear of Umesh Reddy gripped Karnataka like a vice. Women were afraid to step outside, fearing they might fall prey to the predator lurking in the shadows. He even began targeting lone women in broad daylight, breaking into homes and attacking them when they were most vulnerable. Despite the scale of his crimes, the police were able to gather evidence in only 9 cases. Based on these, Umesh Reddy was sentenced to death. However, years of legal wrangling ensued as courts debated whether he should face the gallows or spend his life behind bars. Finally, after 2 decades of deliberations, the verdict was delivered in 2022, life imprisonment without parole. And thus ended the reign of one of India's most chilling serial killers. His story is a stark reminder of the darkness that can exist within the human psyche. If you found this story shocking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more gripping tales. See you in the next video.